Howdy, friends. Did you know on Spotify you can listen to all of your favorite artists and podcasts in one place for free? You don't even need a premium account. Spotify has a huge catalog of podcasts on every topic, including your favorite pod, Tabletop Talk from Third Floor Wars. On Spotify, it's easy to follow your favorite podcast so you never miss an episode. Premium users can download episodes to listen to offline wherever you are. They make it easy to share what you're listening to with all of your friends on Instagram. So help support all of the content coming from Third Floor Wars and download the Spotify app. Search for Tabletop Talk on Spotify or browse podcasts in the Your Library tab. Make sure to follow us so you never miss an episode of Tabletop Talk. Howdy friends, Craig here. In this episode, Alyx Drake and Robert Singer reveal why 10 Thunders players are bringing McCabe to the table for Malifaux 3rd Edition. They go in depth on how to maximize his effectiveness and the tricks you can pull with this crew. For those of you that play McCabe, pay close attention because if you don't, this master is going to loot your points and you're going to lose your next matchup. Do you enjoy the content coming from the third floor? We love making it. You can help support our efforts and get a cool shirt or other swag by going to thirdfloorwars.com and clicking on the shop link at the top. Check out all the funny and cool t-shirts and swag we have there for you. Show off your love for the game and support the third floor at the same time. Check out our shop at thirdfloorwars.com. Before we jump in, we have a special offer from our friends at Gadzook Gaming. Now, Gadzook has always been one of my favorite online retailers because of their unique selection and great customer service. They're probably best known for selling individual Malifaux models, so you don't have to buy an entire crew box for just that one model you need. Check them out as you start building your crews for 3rd Edition. They're offering our US and Canadian listeners a sweet deal. Free shipping on all orders over $100. Use the promo code THIRDFLOOR, one word, THIRD. And using that promo code helps us bring you content on this podcast and our YouTube channel. Swing by GadzooksGaming.com and use the promo code THIRDFLOOR. All the details are in the show notes. Now on to the episode.
I've been getting a lot of work out of the Dawn Serpent, and I know he looks a bit like the lesser, smaller brother of the Shadow Emissary.
I actually have a list that is kind of and it's very rare for me in Malifaux, but it's my actual kind of weirdly all-comers list.
Probably I don't know about Robert, but this is probably my favourite artifact. It's probably my go-to one. It's really, really important for the crew for you to recognise when you need to change pace.
Things better than stepping away from the screens, unplugging and sitting around a table to do battle with your friends. Every week, Third Floor Wars brings you the latest strategies, tactics, and reviews on board games, card games, and miniature games like Malifaux. If you want useful information on the games you already play, or new insights on great games other people are playing, you are in the right place. Craig and Ray welcome you to the third floor and the Tabletop Talk broadcast.
Craig here on the third floor. Today we're going to do a deep dive into the 10 Thunders Master McCabe and how the Wastrel crew works in Malifaux 3rd Edition. Now, my guests today are Alyx Drake and Robert Singer, and both of them have been on the show before. Alyx gave us a great episode on how he won a recent UK event, and Robert gave us all the secrets on Rasputina. So we are really lucky that they both had a chance to come back and talk about something outside of really what Robert discussed and Alyx touched on, and that's talking McCabe. So first off, Alyx, welcome back to the third floor.
Thank you very much, Craig.
And at the time of this recording, Alyx is just coming off a pretty strong showing at the Scottish GT. but not to get too deep into it, Alyx, but did McCabe see the table?
He did not actually.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm sure you probably some of your listeners are aware that, but the British meta is currently on hold with dual masters, and also not allowing unreleased miniatures. So I'm sure we'll get into it in the show, but a decent proportion.
That puts a barrier up. Yeah,
it's interesting. I think a lot of it's just for helping new people get in. People that weren't maybe part of the beta testing, that don't have access to the beta rules. There's easier access for them to come to the tournaments and know that what they're going to be facing is actually official.
It's funny how, and it's something that I forget. Because I was involved in the open beta, but there's, many people that were not only in the open beta, but were also in the closed beta.
Yeah.
And, we've been playing Malifaux for a while now. But there's a lot of people coming on now that this is their first introduction to 3. And it's easy to take that for granted.
Yeah, it is. So it was just a step to make it, like we said, more accessible. And so everyone knew that the rules and the models that they were going to be facing were official. So
that makes total sense.
Yeah, did put a bit of a damper on McCabe's day, so I put him on the back burner. But I'm ready for him to be out in force now.
All right, and Robert, welcome back to the third floor.
Thanks for having me, Craig.
Yeah, man. What have you been doing as far as gaming lately?
Lately, I've been doing 2 things. I've been playing some more of my Dirty Arcanists. I've been testing out a lot of things with Sandeep. And really
interesting.
Playing with those elementals and some of the filth that he can do. And I do mean that there are some things that are just really, really, really filthy about him. But
I'm hearing just through the connections I have here, having the show and stuff, and to the different chats I'm involved with, that I feel like you Dirty Arcanists are just figuring out how gross he is.
Yeah. Right now, I'm the only one in our meta who has been playing him consistently. But I know that Roman, another friend of the show, is going to be trying him out soon, and that's going to be scary.
And Steve Bynum, who did the Marcus deep dive and who did the Molly deep dive. Steven's been playing around with Sandeep, both as a primary and a hired master. And just as a rule, if Steven's using it, it's dirty.
I will say this is that I don't think there's the same problems that he was notorious for in second ed, and I'm talking about Sandeep, not Steve.
Sure,
but I do think that there's just a lot of strength there. Outside of that, I've been actually practicing a lot with McCabe because the Tyrant tournament at Gen Con is coming up next week, and I live in Indianapolis, and so Gen Con is literally in my backyard.
Nice.
And so I plan to play McCabe and Thunders in that. And so I've been doing a lot of prep with that.
Very, very cool. Yeah, you can. And what's cool is that this won't be out before Gen Con, so you can divulge all your secrets about McCabe and not have to worry about the Gen Con people hearing it before they have to play against you.
I was definitely happy that we pushed it back a week. Gen Con, it's another event that I've yet to go to. And I don't know if you guys saw the Gen Con list that Weird put out of all the goodies that are going to be there. But for us Reser players, it's going to be an expensive Gen Con. We got all kinds of goodies. I will tell you, I was already looking to pick up Molly as my third Reser Master, and the Pirates totally solidified it for me.
Yeah, it's a cool box.
That pirate hat is going to sell so many of those boxes.
Absolutely.
Did you guys see my post on Weird Place where I was like, all right, you guys need to tell me who's responsible for it? It turns out, I guess it was Matt Carter's idea. So
yes, I did see that.
I knew I liked that guy.
Yes.
But to Alyx, to your point, I think I don't know if Weird could overestimate how many boxes were sold because of the hat.
The majority of them.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's one of those things where you're like, oh boy, that looks really cool. And then you see the hat and you go, oh no, now I've got to buy it.
Yeah. I wonder how many models we're going to see, other models, not just Archie, wearing that hat.
It'll be it.
You're going to see a lot. I mean, I already have players. We have a lot of Reser players in our community, and several of them already want to put it onto their carrion emissary and paint the carrion emissary up as a parrot instead of a crow.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's good stuff. All right. Well, guys, let's talk a little bit about McCabe. And so what we're going to do is we're going to focus on, of course, McCabe, both as a primary leader as well as a hired master. And we're going to talk a lot about the Wastrel crew. Boy, that's hard to say. And we're going to dig deep into how both of you guys kind of, not only build a crew around McCabe, but how you actually, play him and how McCabe brings you to victory and increases your chances of winning the game. And we'll talk, of course, about whether the faction and master declared by the opponent impacts any decision-making as well as the pool itself. So, Robert, let's start with you. Can you kind of give our listeners a kind of a quick overview of McCabe? For someone who's never played against McCabe before, has never ran McCabe before, what are kind of the highlights that we should know?
I'd say the first major highlight for him is that he is an incredibly fast master and incredibly mobile. We've heard even here on the show about, masters like Karis, and her flight is really great. McCabe, I think, is in some ways even more mobile because he does have a very high movement, move of 7. He also has unimpeded, which means that he can is completely unaffected by severe terrain. And he importantly has an ability called Trample, which means that he can move through other models. So he can really just kind of run through most things with the exception of blocking or impassable terrain quite easily in the game. Go ahead.
That trample ability is one of the many abilities that you come across that you read and go, "Wow, that's pretty cool." But you get that on the table and see that in play, and it is huge.
Yeah, and what I find, and we'll definitely dive into this, and I think Alyx will have some interesting thoughts on this, I'm sure, is that trample coupled with one of his other abilities really trips a lot of players up. That other ability is called Make Way, and it's about how he interacts with both the movement and duels that he forces opposing models to take if he moves over you. So outside of that, though, McCabe also, in addition to the movement, the trample, the unimpeded, he also has Ride With Me, which is a similar, same bonus action that the vast majority of the riders for each faction has, which is another 5-inch push that he gets, along with being able to transport another model who's size 2 or lower. So McCabe himself offers a lot of mobility. He has very good attacks, but he also, one of the big mechanics and the famous mechanic carrying over from previous editions is his Scrounge for Relics, which allows him to take corpse or scrap markers and discard them for an artifact upgrade that he can then, he has a built-in trigger to either dole it out to another minion or Wastrel keyword model, or keep it on himself. And the upgrades do varying degrees of different things. One is the famous, was dubbed by a lot of folks in second ed as the Lightsaber, his artifact that essentially allows you to ignore armor, hard to wound, hard to kill, and shielded. But he has others that are of varying degrees of usefulness, but he uses that to boost his crew. And even for minions or wastrels, allow them to gain fast on the turn that they receive the artifact.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, actions from a master are valuable things. You've got 3 of them and you've got a bonus action. And, sometimes we can see actions on a master's card that, seem significant. So in case of McCabe, now, is it a bonus action or it's a tactical action?
It is a tactical action.
So you can do it multiple times. And, you always have to weigh whether that, what the benefit that's being handed out is worth it. So like, for example, in say Molly has an ability to reactivate a forgotten minion. And, when you first read something like that, you go, wow, that's great. But then you go, well, wait a second, I'm trading one action of a very limited pool of actions out of a master and handing it over to a minion. And is that good? So that's one of the things that I think is important when you're looking at McCabe, is, making that decision. As cool as it is to throw relics around, I think that you have to remember that you're spending a very limited resource when you do that.
Absolutely. The other aspect, so that's one aspect of McCabe. Those are the things that make him who he is and what he does. The really interesting thing with the rest of his crew is that, and it's twofold, and part of that is out of, I would say, necessity at this point, because McCabe has such a limited hiring pool. But the actual keyword models for Wastrel right now, by and large, are focused on scheming. Now, they do have a few tricks here and there, but again, they are mostly mobile schemers. His hucksters have a lot of ways to get around the table and do various things and manipulate schemes and throw scheme markers out. Also, his new henchman, which is Desper LaRoe, he has a lot of mobility. I think he's probably one of the most mobile models in the game. Just the amount of abilities for it to just get around where it needs to be when it needs to be. So yeah, I would say that overall he really is focused as a crew a lot on high mobility tactics and really accomplishing those schemes and strats that really favor mobility.
Yeah. We've talked quite a lot on this show about, and you, with your other guests have, about mobility being really key in 3rd edition and the key to a lot of the strats and schemes, and that's what McCabe brings to your crew. If you're after an incredibly mobile master, that's McCabe. I like to liken him to maybe the 10 Thunders version of Zip.
Nice.
In a way, is maybe
Absolutely.
slightly less disruptive or annoying, though arguably not. He might be slightly more damaging if the situation favours, with grouped up models and just supporty in different ways. Obviously, he doesn't put down piano markers or anything, but his sort of movement and some of the like the slow and the stagger that he puts on people are disruptive. The ride with me particularly, it helps with his mobility because it's cutting down on the disengages that he has to make.
Oh, good point.
It means that he can still be scheming and doing whatever job you need him to, even if he is engaged. And I think that's my biggest point about McCabe there, is that he's incredibly flexible. He'll fill any role you want him to. He won't fill them all. He can only really do one job at a time or 2 half jobs. But he's a very flexible piece to get varying things done.
Yeah, and it's funny because when you see Ride With Me, the first thing you think of is, I want to do that to find some efficiencies by I'm going to move anyway and taking somebody with me. But to kind of your point, Alyx, just the ability just to do a push as a 0, whether you take somebody with you or not, is important.
Yeah. You push, trample over a model, cause a duel, and then go and do whatever you wanted. Whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah, and before we move on real quick, though, Alyx, can you kind of walk us through what I think is something that's very unique about McCabe? And can you talk to us about the mounted dismounted?
Yeah, I can do. So he's got a demise ability where when he's killed, he's instead replaced by dismounted McCabe, by McCabe on foot. Any upgrades that he had when he's on his horse do transfer onto his foot version, and he drops the corpse, the corpse of his pony. I think he does lose quite a lot of his flexibility once he's dismounted, and he becomes a little bit more of a tarpit sort of piece. He's not running around scheming or disrupting as much, but if he's in the right place, he's still very valuable. In a way, it sort of gives him 17 health. Because he has 12 health when he's on his horse and then 5 when he's on foot. And I think I mentioned this before, that it's a little bit like having a hard to kill halfway through your health track.
Yep.
In a way that, he takes the 12 wounds. If it would knock him over, it doesn't, and then he drops he gets out on foot. And it's quite important. Once, in my eyes, once he goes down, once he comes off his horse, he does lose quite a bit. But he's still useful.
And you get 12 wounds out of him when he's on the horse, so it's not he's in there. And I think the one thing, real quick, to make sure everybody knows, is that it is a demise ability. So watch out for models on the other side of the table that mess with your ability to do a demise. And there's a lot of them out there. Manos out of Rezzers is an example. I think Charm Warders do it as well.
Yeah, they do. Or Executes as well.
Good call.
I was going to say anything with an Execute trigger.
Yeah, I think when you look at the Wastrel crew and you look at the keywords, you're starting a game, someone asks you about the keywords and you're thinking like looted supplies, and but then you're looking at upgrades. I think that's a little bit of not a misdemeanor, but it's a little bit false to just presume that that's what the crew is about. Is card draw with the markers and then the upgrades. I think it's an aspect, but it doesn't really encapsulate the speed that Robert was talking about earlier, and that might be due to the limited keyword at the moment, but the speed and the maneuverability is what we're talking about with that keyword. I think, in my opinion, more so than the looted supplies and the upgrades. They're just like the icing on the cake.
Yeah, one thing that I like to tell people before they play against me with McCabe, or there's a few folks in our meta who have been curious about starting him, is that I think that overall, at first glance, he seems like a mobility master, generalist type master. When you're building a crew that's built around him, so his keyword crew, I actually find that I approach his crew more as control than anything else, because he has access to so many models that, one, are going to be able to do the job that they need to do to score points, but he also has enough room in his crew for some truly devastating abilities to disrupt the opponent. And so there's models who are going to be doing scoring, and there's going to be models who are going to be disrupting the opponent. But the really frustrating thing for the opponent is that you, as the opponent, do not know necessarily which one is doing which job.
Yeah, I mean, I've played against him a few times, and I can tell you that kind of the big thing that really hit me, and this is going to tie into what I think both you, Alyx, and Robert are saying, is, boy, is he flexible. And he's flexible for the mobility that Alyx is talking about, because he and his crew can get where they need to be to get the job done that needs to get done. But also, Robert, to what you're talking about, which is, that ability to, in the middle of turn 3, you realize, because of the way that the game unfolded, that you need to, beef up a beater, or you need to speed up a scheme runner, and his ability to just toss those relics and make that happen when it needs to happen, I think gives him that flexibility is the word that keeps popping to mind when I was playing against him.
Yeah, and if I was to sort of try and generalize those roles like through the course of a game, and Robert might have different ideas on this, but I find like my first 2 turns with McCabe is that disruption, is slowing, staggering, causing loads of duels, and really being an annoyance to my opponent, and then maybe turn 3 and 4, it's him doing some scheming or some of the strats while being involved, or countering my opponents, and then 5, it's getting that last point, wherever that victory point is. It's either getting me that victory point or denying my opponent that victory point, and that's how he's like the progression for McCabe. His role changes throughout the game, tends to be for me, unless he's dead.
Unless he's dead.
I will say, actually, I do things a little bit differently with him up front. I use turn 1 usually as a setup for turn for him, and we'll get into, when we get into how we build our crews, why that is. But turn 2, I do use to try and disrupt. I try to focus on a model and we'll get into how he forces a tremendous amount of duels on the opposing player. But then sometimes there are games where I don't even scheme with him at all, because I just use him as a disrupting force throughout and as a support piece for all the other models in my crew. it's not every game, but I'd say probably about a third of my games. He has that role where he is just the ultimate disruptor. I keep him alive just long enough to still just be a really, really, really big thorn in my opponent's side. But I use the rest of the crew to try and score as much as possible.
Alyx, can we talk a little bit about kind of his attack actions? I mean, we've kind of hinted what his attack actions do, but I'd like to get a feel of which attack actions you're using and you think have really the biggest impact in play.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, a lot of the games are around aggressive positioning and getting over that center line. So his two main attack actions and one that's relevant to this. The first one is that I use for that disruption is the net gun. So that's a ranged 10-inch attack, stat 6, resist movement, which is quite interesting. It just does some damage, 2 blast, 3 blast. But the important thing is that it slows and staggers any models that are damaged by it. So he can often ride with me someone up the board, maybe move if he's not in position, and then put a couple of net gun shots into a group of enemies, particularly any sort of melee beaters or sort of like if your opponent's doing any sort of like combo-y sort of things in the first turn, or but maybe people that's trying to move up, he can put a couple of shots into them, slow them, stagger them, and that combination of conditions is really crippling. You know, being reduced to 1 AP and then going down from a movement 5 to a movement 3, for example, is, you know, keeps you almost in your deployment zone. And having that on the blast as well, putting those conditions out on the blast is brutal. So that's the first attack that is that disruption bit. But then his second one, we mentioned before, the bullwhip. It's a 2-inch melee, which on a 50mm basis, as we all know, covers a huge area. The damage isn't particularly impressive on the surface, 2, 3, 4. It's stat 6 resist defense. But what it does do is it pushes McCabe 2 inches, and that's built into the attack. And then there's a built-in condition that says enemy models within 2 inches of him must pass the target number 13 defense duel or suffer 2 damage. So what will often happen if we're talking like in combination with trample and the make way, you'll charge an enemy or a couple of enemies together. If you've got the movement, you'll charge over them, causing a movement 13 duel or suffering 2 damage. You'll then attack them at stat 6, and if you'll place in a way that your base is touching one of the enemies when you make the attack, and if it's successful, you'll push 2 inches over them, causing another duel. And then you'll declare the trigger with the ram, which is built in, that causes everyone within 2 inches to make yet another duel. So you could be looking at 3 duels for one enemy and a bunch of duels for people nearby, and that sort of hand pressure is really really devastating. Really, if they've got the cards, they might be cheating. If they don't have the cards, then it's just on the look of the flip or not. But that's why he's quite good against those grouped up enemies, because he's moving over them, causing repeated duels, and his attack is pulsing out those repeated duels. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and one thing I want to add to that is that the timing of when you pull off those charges or when you do the attacks is very important. The bullwhip attack is always going to be that action, right? So if you charge into the enemy, the way make way works is that it's after resolving an action in which the mob move through. So you're going to force an opposed duel with your opponent. So if you have a good hand, and even if you don't have the greatest hand, you probably have at least 1 or 2 to start cheating, because then after you're able to push that one through, then you're able to force upon your opponent the fact that you made way right from the initial charge, especially if you just tag their base just a little bit. That's all you got to do. And then you're forcing the second duel with rear up. And so you're resolving that rear up trigger first, then you're doing the make way duel. So really what you're doing is you're going to start out at the start of that each attack, action or each action that you're taking with McCabe, especially if you get into that big group, of each time you're forcing that opposed duel, and then you're forcing 2 unopposed duels upon them if you are able to force your way through. So at most, you, the McCabe player, have to cheat 3 cards just so you win the duel. That's all you got to do. It doesn't even matter if you're getting, double negative on the damage flip, because you're still potentially forcing out almost, potentially 9 cards between your opponent's hand and their deck out from them, and going to potentially do anywhere between 2 and 6 minimum damage.
Yeah, that's a really good point there, Robert. That actually you're not that concerned by the accuracy of your attack. You're just trying to force through the success, and then it's the pulses themselves that really do the majority of the work. You're not too interested in being on a straight flip or a double neg. The damage track itself is 2, 3, 4 on the attack. It's the pulses that are doing a lot of the work. Yeah, there is an interesting point though, because it's lots and lots of multiple instances of damage. I don't know if you found this, Robert, but armor is quite effective against him. Even armor 1 takes all those chips of 2 damage down to 1 damage, and it's and so those armored models are quite hard to put down.
I have found that the solution I find to that with the armored models is his upgrade artifact. It was called the bladed artifact in the beta, but I think it's called Time Worn.
It's been upgraded
now.
In there, hasn't it?
Yeah, so his Time Worn Blade allows the model's melee actions to ignore armor, hard to wound, hard to kill, and shielded conditions. So essentially, precise is the name of the ability. And so when I am going up against an armored anything with McCabe, what I do tend to do instead is I actually care a little bit more about the accuracy so that I can make up for some of that damage, because I know, okay, I'm going to ignore the armor. So if I can force in, whether it's by using focus or something else, a straight damage flip so I can cheat in a severe, then I'm making up for it a little bit. And still able to maybe get 6 damage off on the opposing model.
So obviously he can carry his own relics. How is he? Because it's different than in 2, right? So how does he get a relic, and how does he get it on him?
So the biggest, easiest way with the relic is his totem, Luna. Just drops a scrap marker as an action. She can only do it once. It's a tactical action for her, but she can just drop it in, I think it's in base contact with her. And it's from that marker that you can then set it up for McCabe. He just needs a scrap or a corpse marker, I think within 6 inches, on his ability called Scrounge for Relics, tactical action. You just need a 6 for it to go off, and you discard the corpse or scrap marker within range. It's a 5-inch range, and you attach an artifact upgrade to McCabe. Now he has a built-in RAM trigger called Doling Out the Loot, where he chooses an artifact upgrade attached to him and then discards it. Then he attaches it immediately to a friendly minion or wastrel within 6 inches.
So he can, once he picks up off that scrap marker, he can keep it, or as part of the built-in trigger, hand it out.
Exactly. Yeah. So interestingly enough, Luna can also do that, because she also has the ability Scrounge for Relics. So the only issue with her is that she has to, she actually would have to cheat in if she did not flip the trigger to toss it out.
Yeah, so I'm not keen on McCabe doing my digging for my relics. I like his AP doing other stuff. Maybe we should get into how we set up, because I think that's quite important for starting off this engine, really.
Please do.
So as Robert mentioned, Luna digs up the scrap marker for one of her AP, and what I usually do is I'll then with a second AP I'll turn that scrap into an artifact. She needs an 8 to do it rather than a 6 from McCabe. And while McCabe's got the built-in trigger to hand it out, what she does, she gets it for the 8, and then she has to use the quick action that's on the artifact to hand it to someone else. So I use Luna for all my artifact needs. Usually first activation, scrap marker, dig it up, and then I'll pass it to someone else. And this frees up McCabe's AP right from the start. So my setup is usually, and this is one of the disadvantages I've found with McCabe, is, although maybe just the way I play him, is a little bit huddled up with some of the wastrels. I'll have Luna putting down a scrap marker, picking it up, giving it to one of the wastrel crew, which means when they activate, they get fast. And then I'll tend to activate the wastrel crew in order, using their quick action to hand that artifact to the next wastrel in line before having their fast turn, and then the next wastrel in line handing it to someone else before taking their fast turn. And by doing this, you can give all of your wastrel crew and your minions fast in the first turn. In sort of combination with this, I started doing it with Asami with Amanozako, because she has an obey to make someone do an action, and I'd obey Luna to dig up another scrap marker after getting the artifact, and I'd use the scrap marker just for looted supplies. So every time I'm activating a wastrel, I'm drawing a card. Now, obviously, just in the wastrel keyword, you can use the Hucksters to do this with their false claim action. So their false claim action puts down 2 scheme markers, needing a 6, and with a trigger on a mask instead, you can put down 1 scheme marker and a scrap marker. So hopefully, you're hoping for a 6 of masks in your opening hand, or if you've drawn one with a looted supplies, and then I'll have a Huckster replace that marker, that scrap marker, into the cluster, so that everyone activating triggers their looted supplies and they get to draw cards. The other bonus for this is it means in the second turn, Luna's able to sort of walk forwards, dig up another relic from that one that was put down by the Huckster, and hand it on again. So you can have 2 turns of a fair number of your minions and wastrels getting fast without having to stay back in your deployment zone to do it. That extra scrap allows her to keep it going, if that makes sense. I don't know if Robert does something slightly different, or.
So I do very similar on turn 1, especially my Hucksters and on Desper. The one thing I will add to what Alyx just said is that Luna also allows the friendly Wastrel minion models to actually, when they pass it off, to double the range of the this action, the bonus action that allows the upgrade to be passed out to somebody else. So what Alyx was mentioning of moving Luna further up the board on turn 2, it allows your crew then to spread out a little bit more, because she's in a more centralized location where then those models can, you're not going to have as many models necessarily who are going to pass upgrades around, but you still get a fair amount of them who are getting fast and then becoming an issue because they're going to score points, and your opponent has not a lot of options when most of your crew is getting fast.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Robert. It allows the take this action when you're passing it out to be 12 inches if you're within 3 inches of Luna, and I think Luna is able to, when it's declared, you can place Luna in base contact with the target after the action resolves. So that gives Luna sort of more mobility to move that aura around. So you're not as restricted with your ranges of passing around as it looks like at first glance.
So it sounds to me, Alyx, like, as a McCabe player, you have to be a little careful about spending too much time passing stuff around turn 1 and turn 2, because I think that what we're all finding is that the days of you and your crew huddled in your deployment zone for a couple turns just doesn't cut it in 3. So it sounds like you have to kind of find that balance.
Yeah, exactly. Activation order is really, really important for the crew, and it can be sometimes that can be something where you come up unstuck a little bit when you really want to activate something else, but if this chain requires a certain order, so that's the pros cons sort of balancing decision-making process that you've got to make going through that. But there's got to be some disadvantages to the crew, doesn't there?
And I will add to that there are plenty of occasions where I have just completely broken that order of operations because it was either going to prevent my opponent from scoring and I could stop them in that moment, or it was going to seal the deal where I had to act now to score the points. Otherwise, I would probably lose the chance for the game. So everything that we're saying, while it is all very good and it's going to work for most games, still, and I think we've all mentioned it before here on the show, still do what's going to score you the points or deny your opponent.
And keep that flexibility that McCabe brings to you're choosing him to be that master that can respond. So don't get bogged down with doing a set order of actions that tries to get the maximum amount of efficiency out of it. Efficiency is one thing, and having this combo or these series of actions that give you the most amount of resources and the most amount of AP. But like Robert said, if you need to do something that's going to deny points or that's going to interrupt your opponent, and that's going to be more beneficial, then you've got to do that.
Yeah, and you got to be careful with it too, because there's so many keywords out there now that have kind of really neat interactions. So like the wastrels do with all of the relics and the scrap markers and the handing out fast over and over again. Molly's got all the fading stuff that requires things to be activated in a certain order. McMorning, getting everybody up to 10 poison by the beginning of turn 2. But I think we have made the point over and over again on the show that that stuff may not be scoring you points, and you need to be ready to abandon this turn 2 script you had in your head and pay attention to what's happening on the board.
Turn 2, I don't think I have a script.
Well, but it's easy to build one though when you're dealing with these types of machines. Yeah. I could see myself, the first time looking at McCabe and go, I'm going to do this turn 1, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then I'm going to do this turn 2 once I've pushed Luna up and stuff like that. And that's fine, I think, to understand that and know that can be done. But you got to keep your head on a swivel.
Oh, you absolutely do. And I would say that I can say, even just from experience, that I will do the sort of upgrade engine maybe once to twice per game. But I would say about half of my McCabe games, I abandoned it even halfway through turn 1, just because the opponent made a mistake and it presented a very clear opening for me to score immediately at the top of, turn 2. And so capitalizing on that and then realizing, oh, okay, well now I'll be able to set up these models to then, I only really need fast on 2 of these models to really ensure that I'm going to score. I think part of that also just depends on what you're taking and what you're using in a McCabe crew. The way Alyx utilizes McCabe, especially as a hired in master, is very different than how I use him as a strict single master with the actual crew. And I'm sure that he and I differ a little bit on how, our crew selection there as well. And so when you hear about the type of crew I take with McCabe, you'll understand why I don't have to worry as much about the big engine, because I'm just not using as many wastrel keywords.
Do you think we should take some time to talk about the actual artifacts themselves?
Yeah, let's go. If you don't mind, Alyx, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So there's 3: the lightsaber, Time Worn Blade, the Phantasmal Mask, and the Faded Mirror. As Robert has already said, the blade gives precise, ignoring armor, hard to wound, hard to kill, and shielded. All of the artifacts actually have a ability on them, and then they have a quick tactical action. So the Time Worn Blade's tactical action is a 3-inch pulse. It's stat 5, target number 10, and all models within range must pass a target number 12 defense duel or suffer 2 damage. So that's increasing the amount of these simple duels that your opponent's having to make. Though I don't find myself using it too much, just because of the ride with me is also a quick action, and that can cause duels as well, just by pushing over people, and that movement often I find more important. That's the blade. The mask gives life leech, So that one is a 4-inch aura. And when an enemy model starts its activation within that aura, the model with the artifact heals 1 and the enemy suffers 1. This is probably I don't know about Robert, but this is probably my favorite artifact. It's probably my go-to one. That if I'm not sure which one I need, I'll usually put this one on, and it will usually find its way back to McCabe, maybe by the end of turn 1 if I can. But I do. If I want an artifact on McCabe, I do like this one. He tends to get in the mix sometimes with groups of people, and that persistent drain on them, on their ticking for 1 health every time they activate, along with the movement jewels, and also healing him, keeps him on his horse. It can be a massive amount of healing if you're near 4 people and they all activate. You get 4 health back. So I really like the mask. The quick action that goes with that is that friendly models within range get shielded 1, and the range is a 3-inch pulse. There's a trigger on it that heals the person with the artifact 2 and ends a condition on them. So that can be quite useful if you're trying to, along with the healing from the life leech, to get that trigger off if you need some more healing on the model that's got the artifact. And then the last one is the Faded Mirror. And I don't use this one as much, but it definitely has its uses, obviously. It gives you Know the Warrior, which is the ability where when you cheat in an opposed duel with an enemy model, if you have focus, you can draw a card after resolving the action. And it gives you a quick action to draw a card if your opponent's got more cards in their hands than you do. And they're both really strong abilities. I suppose the thing with using it there is whether you're, let's say Sadia has Faded Mirror, does he use his focused for the attack, or does he keep the focused and you cheat and then get to draw a card? That's the decision making process there. But that was good if you're down on cards, or if your opponent's if you're playing against a crew that's got a really good card draw engine, or just draws a lot of cards in itself, that one can keep your hand topped up. So yeah, those are the 3 artifacts.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I agree as far as the mask being the probably the go-to. Yes. So I do like that one a lot. I use it on a lot of models. I will say that if you do struggle against players players who are using your Zoraida or Sandeep or Yugo or Lynch, Faded Mirror is invaluable for making sure that those cards are coming to you, because there is not as much card draw unless you're guaranteeing that you're getting scrap or corpse markers out for your crew to loot corpses. And so really having that extra bonus action can be really key.
Very interesting that, when you think about all of those pulses and auras that those things hand out, when those things are on McCabe on that 50 mil base, I mean, you're covering a lot of ground.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah. It really is.
Very cool. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, I want to dive in a little bit more on not only McCabe as a leader, and we're going to talk about what the core crew is and what models we tend to hire into McCabe. But I also want to talk a little bit about, him as a hired master as well. So we'll be right back.
Howdy friends, Craig here. With 3rd edition Malifaux released, it's time for you to get a new mat with new deployment zones. We've tried every mat in the business, and nobody has better quality and selection than Mats by Mars. They're waterproof and they roll and unroll easily, and they're even wet erase Marco compatible. They offer over 35 designs and let you add M3EO overlays for making deployment and positioning a breeze. Check them out at matsbymars.com. They are offering a sweet discount for our listeners. After you found the perfect mat, use the promo code 3rd floor to get 10% off your entire order. If you really want to support us, in the notes of your order, request that our logo be put in the corner of your mat. It's the only way to make the best mat in the business even cooler. Again, that's Mat by Mars. Use the promo code 3rd floor to get a 10% discount. Details are in the show notes.
So, wow, after doing several of these deep dives, I think this is one of the longest dives that segments I've done just on the master because, there's so much going on there. But what I kind of like about everything that you guys talked about is each one of those different things, the mobility, the flexibility, the handing out fast, the ability to put the relic you need on McCabe or the relic you need on Sadir. Those are all not just pretty and fun, but they're also pretty obvious paths to victory. And it capitalizes, then I think, on that mobility and flexibility that we've talked about. But Alyx, I know that you have been using McCabe a lot as a hired master. And we actually got a really good question from the audience. Michael Hutchison called in, and he had a question. I'd like you to hear your thoughts.
So what masters do not benefit from McCabe as a second master?
Okay, so that sounds like quite a loaded question, really. Which masters do not benefit? I think if I was going to be obtuse, I'd say, well, none of them, because we currently only run single master in Britain. Or I could give the other answer, which is depends on strats and schemes. But I suppose if we're answering, I think what Michael's suggesting there is that McCabe is such a strong master that any other master can benefit from hiring him in as a second. And I do see the thought process in that. I like McCabe, that's why I run him. But he is 16 stones, and that's 16 stones that you're taking away from the rest of your crew. So the masters that don't benefit from him are those masters that really require either a lot of models from their keyword or some synergies. So I'd say Yanlo's another master that I run, and I don't run McCabe with him because he's quite pressed for stones, and he needs his stones for his ancestors and his retainers that he's running, and he can't afford, in my eyes, 16 stones on McCabe to add. McCabe would give him obviously some more mobility and stuff, but in a strat, if I'm taking Yanlo in Reckoning and I don't need that mobility, then McCabe's just not worth those 16 stones. I think maybe some other masters that probably wouldn't benefit too much from McCabe, maybe Shenlong and the monk keyword. The more monks you're having, the more benefit you're getting from Shenlong swapping styles and getting concentrates. The more benefit you're getting from Sensei Yu and the aura that he's putting out. And McCabe would potentially just detract from that synergy that you've already got within your 15 stones. Maybe Masaki already, in a similar vein to McCabe, she's quick and she'll put pressure on your opponent in a different way than McCabe, in a more scalpely way, where she appears from her shadows. So maybe she already has that flexibility and that movement, and doesn't really require any more from McCabe. It does just depend on, but yeah, strats and scheme wise, if you need that movement, then yeah, a lot of crews can benefit from him. The masters that do benefit a lot from him coming in, Mei Feng, and hiring McCabe as a second master into Mei Feng, you'll often get you get the benefit from your looted supplies almost constantly, drawing the cards, and you've got enough scrap to be digging up as many relics as you need. Yeah, he'd probably benefit being in Lynch. Lynch is apart from teleporting Huggy and Kitty, it's a relatively not slow as such, but predictable crew in where it's going to be. So McCabe would bring something extra there. I think some masters would benefit from him more than others. Some masters not so much. Oh, I hope that answers his question.
I would like to add to that two things. One is Yanlo, I think, just really, really doesn't need anybody else. His crew is just one of those that I think Weird just did a really, really wonderful job of making the in-keyword cohesion so tight and so good that you rarely need to hire anything out of keyword with that crew. The second point I want to make is that I agree with everybody that Alyx just said. The one thing I will add is that I have played around a bit with using McCabe with Yuko, and the amount of card pressure that McCabe alone can put on the opponent, especially when you're bringing him into a Yuko crew, where you have Kabuki warriors who are size 2 and can benefit from McCabe having the Ride With Me ability, and the fact that Yuko is limiting the hand size of your opponent to 5 cards, or generally 5 cards unless you're playing against Arcanists, really puts even more pressure on the opponent. And I do think that Yuko does lack a little bit of that mobility, a tiny amount of that extra buffing and crew support. And outside of Kabuki warriors, they lack a beater who can take a few hits.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway from what both of you just said is that, and this might not just apply to the, talking about hiring McCabe, but I think there are definitely keywords out there that are more dependent on a crowd of having, that keyword than others. Like, you guys mentioned Yan Lo. He really needs to have a lot of in keyword hires for him to reach full power. You compare that to, say, a Seamus in Rezzers. Seamus really doesn't need all of that. And it sounds like from a decision-making standpoint, you have to kind of look at hiring McCabe or any master as, can I afford something out of faction, which I think for some leaders is easier to be able to do and not lose effectiveness versus others.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And then, yeah, like I said, it's a cop out, but the strats and the schemes for whether McCabe's going to benefit. The last game I played at the weekend at the Scottish GT was Reckoning with Yan Lo, and there was no way I was putting McCabe into that. It would have detracted too much from the crew, but also it wouldn't have helped with the schemes. It'd have probably been to a detriment, I think. And the way I played and the way the game turned out, it wouldn't have helped.
No, that makes total sense to me. And Robert, that Yoku McCabe combo that you just talked about, I got shivers even thinking about the fact that, Yoku is just destroying the size of the amount of cards that I can have in my hand. And then all that flipping that McCabe was going to make me do it. I don't enjoy thinking about playing against that. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So, Robert, I want to get a little bit more idea from you about kind of your core crew when you're bringing McCabe as a leader. I mean, obviously, you're bringing in Luna, but can you kind of give me an idea? Is there some core beaters or schemers or support pieces that are making up the vast majority of your crews?
Yeah, so McCabe has been really interesting to me for 2 reasons. One is, compared to everybody else in 3E, he has the most limited in-keyword hiring pool. And it was revealed to us in beta that there was a reason for that. And the reason being is that because he is dual master and now dual faction, and we now know that that is the Explorer Society, several models that are going to be his keyword, they are currently in development and they will be released when the new faction is released. Mm-hmm. But we knew going into the new edition that they would not be available to him for use in Thunders. So that alone affects my crew building and has really shaped how I use him right now. And I imagine that as soon as Explorer Society get released, I expect probably next year sometime, I don't know, we will see, you would probably be able to have Alyx and I back to have a completely different discussion on how McCabe works, because I think that there will be a lot of things very different, not necessarily about how McCabe plays, but how the crew itself functions. So with that being said, what's really interesting, the second point I want to make is that I actually have a list that is kind of and it's very rare for me in Malifaux, but it's my actual kind of weirdly all-comers list with McCabe. Now, I don't use this for every game. I use it probably for, I want to say 55% of my games. This is the crew that I take from top to bottom. Well, then we can then talk a little bit about some other differences in other models I do like to take with him that are not these models, but we'll start at the top. So weirdly enough, I as much as I really enjoy Sadir as a character in Malifaux and all the fluff around him, and I do enjoy him, I actually don't take him terribly often, mainly because unless it's a thing like Reckoning, I just don't see a lot of ways that he's going to score me points unless I'm using McCabe to get him moving up around the board. And so I always, at least in the beta, and hopefully for Gen Con, because he'll be getting released, I always take Desper Leroux. And that is probably the number one model that I take, one of two that I take every single game, just because he is capable of so many things. So Desper is his henchman. He only costs 8 stones. He's got a health of 8. He's got pretty basic stats of move 5, defense 5, willpower 5. What makes Desper so good is that he has leap, which we all know and love, bonus action to place anywhere within 6 inches. But front of card, he also has the typical looted supplies. So if there's a scrap or corpse nearby, you can draw a card. He has Don't Mind Me. So if he is engaged, he can still interact. Or if he had to take the disengage action, he can still interact. He has what I think is probably one of his most important abilities, which is Expert Getaway, which states this model may ignore terrain and models while moving. So that's anything. It's almost, in some ways, it's essentially incorporeal without the damage reduction. Right. And so it just makes him very, very, very mobile for accomplishing schemes, accomplishing strategies like plant explosives, accomplishing, getting the turf markers that are far away during turf war. He's just so versatile. And that's before you even get to the point where one of his abilities is Loot Their Corpse. At the end of this model's activation, it may remove a corpse marker within Aura 2 to add 1 soulstone to the crew soulstone pool. So if you're playing against rezzers who are wanting to get corpse markers out there, or if your crew in Reckoning is killing a lot of things and you're running low, you just need to get them nearby by the end of the activation to one of those corpse markers to remove it to add a stone to your pool. So in addition to those, he does have 2 attacks that are very interesting. I don't use them that often because I'm using Desper to score, and usually those more mobile schemes, like I mentioned. But he does have a Hidden Blade attack, which is a 1-inch melee, stat 5, resist defense. It's got a built-in crit strike. So the damage, though, is 1, 2, 4, and the attack ignores armor base. So it is kind of a little sneaky way to get through some of those armored models. And like I said, it's got the built-in crit strike as well. So you can actually do a surprising amount of damage if, Mech Arachnid Swarm or something like that gets up in his face. He also has a really fascinating range 1 melee called Expert Thief, which says target a model that can use soulstones. Target must discard a soulstone. If it does so, add a soulstone to this crew's soulstone pool. That's the attack. So it's got 3 triggers on it. One is reposition to move up to 3 inches. One throws out stunned, and then the built-in trigger on a mask is once per activation, enemy only drop a scrap marker within 2 inches of the target. Again, setting up further uses for artifacts, further card draw, etc. He also has a 8-inch ranged attack called Grappling Hook, which is similar to the Harpoon attack on some models. It's 2/3 damage. It's got the pull and drag trigger, and then you're coming with me. So place him into base, or place the target, or push the target up to 3 inches, and then place them all into base contact. So just like McCabe, this model just does a lot. It's definitely more on the mobile front, but it is one that I find that I'm taking 9 times out of 10 in my crews with McCabe. From there, as far as schemers go as well, I always take Hucksters, which you've already heard Alyx and I talk a little bit about. Hucksters are one of those models that I think are what really helps define the McCabe crew and allows him to do certain schemes and strategies, but especially schemes that other crews will probably just completely ignore because it's so much more difficult for them to accomplish, and Hucksters make it very, very easy. So starting out, Hucksters, again, they have a very basic stat line. They're health 6, they've got move, defense, and willpower 5. They do have manipulative, which helps prevent favorable attack actions against them before they've activated. They have the looted supplies ability for the card draw, and then they also have an ability called This Will Fetch a High Price, which is after the model uses the interact action to remove any scheme marker, add 1 soulstone to the Cruel's pool. So again, they have counterplay, especially in things like Harness the Ley Line, Search the Ruins, things like that, where they can get, in addition to preventing things that are going to allow your opponent to score, you're also now getting a benefit in that soulstone. They have an attack action called Gain Weapons, which is good only mainly because the target cannot declare resistance triggers from it. Otherwise, they're decent attacks, but you're really not going to be using them terribly often. Their bonus action is that's on their card is actually an attack action called Sales Pitch, which for me does not come up terribly often, but when it does, it is very fun and very funny. And anytime I find my Huckster within 6 inches of an enemy model, I always attempt the action because it's essentially free action anyway. So it is a stat 5 resist willpower, 6-inch range, and it's enemy only. This model and the target both discard the top card of their fate deck. If this model's discarded card is higher, draw that card. If the target's card is higher, they draw that card, and this model adds a soulstone to its crew's soulstone pool. So no matter what, if it goes through, you're getting a benefit, but even just forcing the duel upon your opponent, you're at least taking a card out of their hand, or out of their deck, possibly their hand, if they're trying to avoid losing their soulstones.
I was just going to say the only situation where you don't get a benefit from using that is when you both reveal the same value card, and the amount of times that this has happened to me is exceedingly frustrating. you're like, excellent, I'm going to get a stone or I'll get a card, and then you both reveal a 13 and you're like, oh, or you both reveal a 10 and you're like, oh no. So, but yeah, apart from that situation, you always get a benefit, aren't you? You're always getting a stone or a card, and the idea of just sort of opening up your coat and selling someone loads of used watches is hilarious. I really like Sales Pitch.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite. It's such a unique action, and there's just no reason not to try it. So the one thing I will say also, or the next thing about them that I think is very, very important, and probably arguably the most important aspect of the Hucksters, is both of their tactical actions, and the fact that they have these two combined, to me, makes them probably the best scheme runners, especially for points and efficiency, in my opinion, in the game right now. So the first one is False Claim, which I believe Union Miners also have this. I can't remember who else in the game has it. It's a 3-inch range, stat of 6, target number 12, and the action cannot be taken while engaged. You drop 2 scheme markers within range. During the end phase, you have to remove just any friendly scheme marker from place, just one. As Alyx mentioned earlier, there is a mass trigger where instead of dropping the 2 scheme markers, they can drop a scheme and a scrap. So this ability I find is tremendous for being able to condense the area that you need to use for things like Harness the Ley Line, which makes accomplishing that scheme so much easier because you're not limited to the interact limitation of the 4 inches for the scheme markers. I also find it tremendous for pulling off Detonate Charges, which so many players I find ignore, because you can really just accomplish this in one activation. Save a Huckster for the end and then just accomplish it. as long as you've got the 6s in hand to make sure that you get it off. The other thing that makes Hucksters incredible is that just like Seamus, they have the secret passage ability. So 12-inch range, stat of 6, target number 14. So you need an 8 for it to go off, but the action states that this action may only be declared if this model is within 1 inch of blocking terrain. Place this model anywhere within range that is within 1 inch of blocking terrain. So essentially you have these models who are going to be able to get multiple scheme markers off in one activation while simultaneously being able to teleport across the board. And when you couple these incredible tactical actions with the fact that you can have fast on these Hucksters, means that you can do very silly things like teleport across the board in one turn, 24 inches, technically about 25. But also, you can end up putting out 3 scheme markers in one turn, all in one place, such as right on the ley line or right on to a model that you've cornered after secret passaging. And there's just a lot of weird, nifty tricks that these guys are able to accomplish.
Yeah, and just to sort of elaborate on what Robert's saying, or maybe not even elaborate, just Hucksters, this because of these abilities, are so important for the crew, and it's really shocking what they can do. Like Robert said, they just teleport up to a corner of the board, out of the way, next to a building, interact to drop a scheme marker on the line, and then and then false claim to put 2 more down, and single-handedly get harness the ley line just by themselves when they weren't even on the center line to start off with. That's really, really powerful. Surprising someone, dropping 2 scheme markers down and getting detonate all by themselves. Really, really, really powerful. And from out of nowhere, it can sometimes feel they can be a little bit card intensive because you need to pass the jewels to do this. But hopefully, you're prioritizing those 6s and 8s that you need for the jewels, and with looted supplies, hopefully you're helping you to draw some more.
What's interesting to me about what you guys are saying is, detonate the charges and harness the ley line. I often see those as, kind of schemes that are tough, and they can be challenging. And in most crews, I would, they would be my last choice if I, was forced into it. It sounds like, because of, again, the speed and those Hucksters and stuff, that you have a lot more schemes in play.
Yeah, so what it does is most crews might have 5 ideal schemes that they want to do, or a few more, but the Wastrel crew, you can almost you can just do all of them if you want. So you can really look at a scheme pool and be like, actually, I could theoretically do all of that, and that's really hard for your opponent to keep guessing. Sometimes you can look at an opponent's crew, and you're like, okay, they're doing these 2, or maybe 2 of these 3, and with the Wastrel crew, you don't know which ones they're doing. If your terrain's right, exactly what they're doing with Harness the Ley Line, they can do for Search the Ruins. They can just jump up into your opponent's half, put 2 schemes next to 2 different pieces of terrain, score your first point for Search the Ruins. So yeah, it really, really opens up a wider range of schemes that are maybe more difficult for other crews. They can, to jump into the sides for outflank, etc. Power Ritual, easy done. Sorry, Robert, go on.
Oh, I was going to say, one of the things I really like about the combination of these 2 models, but especially because of the Hucksters, especially if they get fast on them, is if Power Ritual, for instance, is in there, but I also have other schemes that I know I can get as well, I'll fake Power Ritual with just a false claim, especially if it's corner or flank deployment. I will just fake it, and I'll just throw, the scheme marker out, make my opponent think that that's the scheme marker, and just leave it there the whole game. And then, if it's Search the Ruins or something else, or Breakthrough, or any number of the other things that allow, or outflank, I'll go and actually accomplish one of those instead of the actual Power Ritual, but make them think that I'm doing Power Ritual the whole time, so that hopefully I'm getting them to either have to go and waste actions to go and try and, pick up one of those scheme markers.
And then you use your initial scheme that you were faking Power Ritual to be the one that you remove for the false claim. So
yes,
so yeah, it's powering up, and that is a consideration, that you do have to remove a scheme marker somewhere on the table. So you do have to have maybe someone supporting that, if you want. And I think maybe that's a role for the ruffian sometimes. That's what I use them for anyway.
I use it ruffian. Sometimes I'll use the Tanuki as well for dropping that extra one. So outside of those scheming models, the next two that I want to talk about that are in this kind of all-comers list that I use are really interesting because I have a feeling, Craig, that you're itching to ask about beaters. And the two models that I'm about to bring up they are beaters on the surface, but I also find them to be tremendous scheme runners, which is why I take them in the majority of my lists, and those are the Dawn Serpent and the Shadow Emissary. So Shadow Emissary is cost 10, Dawn Serpent cost 9. The reason I like to take both of them, and I call this list my twin dragon list, is because both are incredibly fast. So they're very mobile because they both have flight. They are minimum movement of 6 each. The Emissary is 6, the Dawn Serpent actually has a move of 7. The Emissary and the Dawn Serpent are also both flyers. They both have flight, so they can ignore some of the terrain and things like that, and other models as they're making the walk or charge action. The other thing that I like that they both share is that they both share hard to kill, and on top of that, they both share agile, which means that the model may leave the engagement range of enemy models with the walk action. The other reason I like these models is that they both have minimum 3 damage melee attacks. And so, and a decent health pool of, I think, a minimum of 9 health for each one. So what I like about these two models is that they can get exactly where I need them to be. And again, that disruption that McCabe can actually pull off. And when I mentioned that I treat McCabe a little bit like a control master, partially it's because of these two models, that between him and the Emissary and the Dawn Serpent, I'm able to be very aggressive in my early turns, get up into some minions that I think might be scheming, or get into a master's face, or get into a henchman's face, or the enemy's big beater. And I'm bringing now a dragon who, as soon as he places, forces a movement duel or suffers 2 damage in the Shadow Emissary and is terrifying. Or the Dawn Serpent, who heals when he's near models and also has counterspell, so forcing the enemy to discard a card to declare triggers. So I'm placing these models who are fast, mobile, can get out of combat, but also are going to tear you up in combat that you have to deal with. But then you as the opponent are potentially going to waste actions trying to kill them. When the Dawn Serpent is going to heal, they both have hard to kill, and I usually take a Tanuki to help heal and support one or both of these models as well. And so you're really just putting the opponent into a really bad situation where they have to figure out what is going to be my best course of action for dealing with these models who are in my face and are going to leave anytime they want.
Yeah, those are excellent points, Robert. So on the surface, these dragons look like beaters. You know, they're 9 and 10 stone, big cost, minimum damage. You know, stat 6 beaters. That almost feel like they have to be answered by your opponent. But then when you need to, they scheme with agile. They can just leave and go off and score your points or deny points if you need them to. I've been getting a lot of work out of the Dawn Serpent, and I know he looks a bit like, you know, the lesser, smaller brother of the Shadow Emissary, but I'm really, really liking him. He's the movement 7 flight is crucial, and he really can bully a flank if you need him to. I'll deploy him on a flank, and I think maybe what we've alluded to before is that the Hucksters and Desper are scoring a lot of points and are doing an awful lot of the job, but you know, the last thing you want is your opponent to be reaching out and killing them. And the Dawn Serpent really helps to protect them just by his positioning and him sort of bullying models that go after them with his healing aura that can do burning, and then, you know, his minimum damage 3. But then he can just leave engagement, kick an idol over the center, and then heal back up if he needs to. and that's
Exactly.
really powerful. Yeah, there was a game at the weekend. He held up maybe 20 stones worth of Ophelia's crew, just fighting off gremlins and healing back up. And then at the end of one turn, he flew. He got me take prisoner on Raphael, and then the next turn he just flew off to the corner and put the last point for power ritual down. He's brilliant as a Dawn Serpent. Really is such a wonderful model, and I don't think he gets as much love as he deserves. Very flexible, similar to McCabe.
Oh yeah, I mean he really so there's two other reasons that I take both the Dawn Serpent and the Shadow Emissary. And for the Dawn Serpent, one thing that I don't do it all the time, but when I do it, it's a lot of fun and it's really funny, and the opponent does not expect it. And that is the fact that Ride With Me has to be a model who is a size lower than McCabe, right? It has to be size 2 or 1. The Dawn Serpent is size 2, which means that after you've activated McCabe and do your Ride With Me, you can actually get that Dawn Serpent on turn 1, 5 inches further, well, actually more than 5 inches further up the board for it to then be able to go wherever the heck it wants on turn 1. And so you're disrupting a model, possibly 2 or 3, immediately that the opponent now has to deal with on turn 2.
Yeah, it sounds to me like, you've got part of this crew, scoring your points, and you want, they're not maybe the hardest to kill models, as most point scoring schemers are, but what I think is interesting is your double dragons and McCabe too can put pressure. And that pressure, it sounds like, can be in the form of dealing out some damage. That pressure could be in the form of being able to react to opponents' movements because they have the mobility. And that pressure also sounds like to be coming from the fact that they both can tar pit a little bit.
Yeah. And so then the one thing I do want to say about the Shadow Emissary, the other reason you take him, and I think it is to Alex's earlier point, as the Dawn Serpent doesn't get as much love as the Shadow Emissary. I think the reason being is that the Shadow Emissary has a very, very powerful quick action called Prophecies in Thunder, which is a 6-inch range, stat 6, target number 12, that allows you to set aside your control hand and draw a number of cards equal to the number that were set aside. You then shuffle the set aside cards and place them either on the top or bottom of your fate deck. More importantly, there is a trigger, a mass trigger, that forces both players to then shuffle their discard pile into their fate deck. Then the player with the least amount of cards in their control hand draws cards until they have as many cards in their control hand as the other player. So what you're doing is you are using the Shadow Emissary not only just as this disruptor, schemer, tar pit, beater, but you're also getting a tremendous amount of card draw and deck manipulation that you would not otherwise have. And that can really, really help McCabe either at the start of the game, start of the turn, mid-turn, or even late turn.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm not sure why it's got a range on it, though. It's got a 6-inch range.
I'm not sure either. It's got the 6-inch range. It's one of those weird things.
I don't think I would have noticed that. That's funny. Yeah. So we obviously, because we kind of teed it off this way, and I think anybody who's played, seen McCabe on the other side of the table is aware of, what a good second master you can be. Alyx, have you ever found yourself hiring a master when McCabe's the leader?
No, I'm probably different from Robert, where he's made this all-comers list that actually sounds really impressive, and I might give it a go with the double dragons. But I run McCabe for a very, very set strategy and scheme pool. Your listeners probably know that I'm running Asami and Yanlo quite a bit, but I run McCabe in a very set pool. So I don't usually put a second master in and with him. And also now that in Britain we don't do second masters in competitively, so I'm just running in for a set strategy and a pool, and that's plant explosives, and or I can do them in idols and turf war. I prefer if it's corner deployment. That's when I really consider him. But no second masters with him. Just him and his crew. and all the versatiles.
Yeah. How about you, Robert?
I think I alluded to this earlier to the listener's question, but I think Yuko is a lot of fun with him. I will usually do that if it's something like Reckoning, right? It's a lot harder to kill a master. So I would, depending on what the schemes are, Yuko is one that I would take with McCabe, just because you're going to force so many duels between Dawn Serpent, Shadow Emissary, and McCabe, and then not to mention Yuko's actual activations before you even get to the part where she's reducing your hand size anyway. So usually for something like that, where I have to do a little bit more killing, and I'm worried about, if assassination or something like that's in there, having that second master, and especially one who's going to reduce the card hand size.
That's risky in Reckoning, with them being worth 3 points, isn't it? Yoko's not too tough.
It is a little bit. It is a little bit risky, so you got to play it very, very, very aggressively. But you do have the ability, and you have a little bit more of that card draw as well with Yuko in there, and also the pass tokens, by having her there as well. So there is some synergy, but overall, I really find that you don't need anybody else with McCabe, especially if you're running McCabe as your main master, just because the crew and some of the other things are just a lot more efficient. And I think that even somebody like Misaki, while she does offer a lot of mobility, a lot of what you would end up using Misaki for, McCabe can do and Desper can do.
Right.
And you're still saving points.
I completely agree.
And you'll have a lot, and you'll have a lot more actions available to you instead of being sucked into just one master. Robert, what is Yoko's leader only ability? I can't remember it off the top of my head. Do you remember?
I don't remember. I could look it up for you real quick.
Yeah, I can't remember if her card, the hand restriction is leader only or not.
I think it might be the -1 hand size as leader only. Yeah,
but that's not the only hand pressure she's putting. So
no, she does lots with her abilities, doesn't she?
Yeah. No, that's nasty. And I could see, both having McCabe hired into a Yoko crew sounds terrible. And having her in a McCabe crew. But I wasn't surprised that you guys, end up saying, it's very rare that you hire a master into McCabe, because it sounds like, a lot of times we're bringing hiring a master to fill a gap. And with all of this flexibility that we keep beating around it, he may not have the gaps that you might see somewhere else.
Yeah, and it's his crew that are focused while he's flexible.
Yep.
I feel like I need to give some love to Sadir. Robert said he doesn't use him too much, but I feel he does have a very set purpose, and that is if you need someone to hold that middle, he can do it. He's very, very contrasting to the rest of the crew's speed. But in some games, when your opponent reveals their master, and you know that they're going to be trying to come up the middle, sometimes you need someone. Sometimes you need someone there. Sometimes it's detrimental to have it there. But if you're trying to contest a claim jump, or is a reasonable target for Vendetta, he's got his place. He's got his place to Sadir in particular pools. I like him.
I was going to say, I do agree that he definitely has his place, and there are situations where I will use him. The biggest place that I will use him is if I know I'm going up against, a Titania or even Rasputina, because or to hell. And the fact that he can really take care of that destructible terrain, and that can be his first action before he just unloads his machine gun into a bunch of things. So I do like him. I do like that most of the time if he's walking, he is going to have focus, and that will definitely help his shots. But he just, for a lot of the strats and schemes right now, really claim jump, you're absolutely right, and turf war are the areas where I would take him to both either contest or even potentially be the one to try and dominate to be the scoring model for claim jump.
They're good. I've got a couple more models I sometimes use in McCabe crews. We can maybe talk about them. I really like Samurai at the moment. And I know they're probably quite similar in Sadir's role, but being a minion, he can benefit from the artifacts, get fast. And I've been often putting the upgrade trained ninja on the Samurai. So this gives some stealth unimpeded and from the shadows. So you can deploy your Samurai right up the board quite aggressively. with the confidence that the rest of the crew is going to be up and joining him very soon. I think often the mistake with maybe a trained ninja model is that they just get killed very quickly and aren't that impactful. But with the rest of the crew being so fast and able to come and support him, and also he's actually really, really tough with 2 armor and the ability to heal. I quite like taking a samurai. Either with trained ninja or not, but samurais have their place. They're really good. They're really strong. Also, we could do some more models. I've been experimenting a bit with Minako Rei now that she's versatile. So we're not paying the extra cost for her. She's 8 stones. And she's any leftover scrap, she's turning them into Katashiro. Which is even more scheme runners for the crew. Mm-hmm. And Katashiro are wonderful. I'm an Asami player, so not having to flip for the leap and just being able to scheme, basically effectively always having 3 AP, minimum of 3 AP, sometimes more if you're taking advantage of the free attacks on the place. Katashiro are really good. Minako Rei making them out of scrap markers, and then being a model that your opponent really doesn't want to put attacks into because of the Karmic Fate upgrade, can be really disruptive. She's almost she punishes your opponent for looking at her wrong, because then she retaliates with irreducible damage and makes her 1 Yudo. So, I'm quite liking her at the moment. So
I'm very glad that you mentioned Minako Rei because she is my alternative list. So usually I take out either Dawn Serpent or Shadow Emissary in favor of her. Yeah. And it's especially in very schemy lists, especially things like Outflank or any of the major mobility ones. The Katashiro are so good at scoring so many different types of things because of that free placement. I also really, really, it's funny that you mentioned her being versatile because when I found out, that was probably to me the most monumental change from closed beta to or from open beta to M3E release. That was the biggest change that I saw anywhere, is that she's now versatile. So I was already taking her at 9 stones, and the fact that
so was I.
and the fact that she's 8 is just, it blew my mind. And I remember telling Roman when he pointed it out to me, I was like, well, that is certainly something I'm going to exploit immediately, because she can be very, very powerful. And the fact that you usually I'll activate her last on turn 1 after I've used up scrap and gotten a huckster to false claim a scrap marker out in addition to the scheme marker. That way everybody has already drawn their cards. That way the artifact's already out, and then she'll make that Katashiro. And then on turns 2 or 3, if I'm not making an artifact, Luna is dropping the scrap just for her to create another Katashiro very easily.
Yeah, that's it, and that's a really interesting balance that we're making there, and that's something that maybe we need to tell to your listeners about when you're playing the crew is that card balance. There's quite a bit of card draw in the crew with looted supplies and with the quality of a quick action on Minako or on the Faded Mirror or with the Shadow Emissary, sort of like changing the quality of your hand. So there is an awful lot there, but it's quite situational and it's not always prominent. And you're always trying to balance those target numbers with the drawing the cards, with the 10s for making Katashiro if you're running Minako Rei. So it's really like this fine balance. You can have lots of cards, you can have not very many, but you're always trying to weave it and make the most of that situation. But then you need the high cards for McCabe to be forcing his duels. So it's really it requires that balance. Sometimes you can have loads and it's really easy. Other times you struggle a little bit and you have to put a bit more effort into it.
Well, I can tell you right now, what scares the heck out of me is the fact that you guys are putting what really sounds just to be some effective crews together, and we haven't even seen, it sounds like, half of his models. I fear when the explorers come out that he's going to get even more tools in his belt, and that's scary to me. So, guys, let's take a quick break. When we get back from the break, I want to talk a little bit more about how we potentially can build to different strategies and schemes. So we'll be right back.
Howdy folks, Craig here. Now if you love gadgets as much as we do, you're going to love the new Third Floor Wars Gadget Bundle from Schooner Labs. Branded with the logo of your favorite podcast, it comes with 2 measuring multi-tools, a compass stepper for those tight and important movements, along with a compact dashboard to track your turn, strat, and scheme scoring along with your soul stones and pass tokens. It is the perfect bundle for anyone who plays Malifaux or just wants to look cool while doing it. The link is in the show notes. Check them out and help support your favorite gaming podcast.
Okay, wow. There's a lot going on there. I get a sense that you're going to want to get a couple games to McCabe under your belt before you maybe even bring him, to a competitive game, because it sounds like there's a lot going on, and you're going to want to really, fully understand all of those tools that are available to you. Alyx, I want to try to think about the pools a little bit. So let's start with strategies. Is there, you kind of hinted at it, is there a strategy that, or a strategy combined with a deployment that makes you immediately pull out your McCabe?
Yes, yeah. Plant explosives, corner deployment. I think the deployment's really important when thinking about McCabe. If you're looking at wedge or maybe even standard, you've got so much speed in the crew to be able to reach out across the board wherever you want. What you don't want is your vulnerable pieces getting killed too soon and stopping you from being able to scheme or strat. So I really like corner deployment because it allows me to maybe have a little bit of that engine in the first turn and make it a little bit more difficult for my opponent to interrupt that. But if I need to step out of that and go and disrupt my opponent, I still can because I'm really fast. So corner deployment's really... it always makes me think of McCabe, does corner deployment. But plant explosives feels like his strategy. You put a bomb on each of the Hucksters, and they'll easily get one down. And you can put a couple on McCabe himself if you're okay with him doing some scheming. I know that me and Robert have talked slightly different roles with him, but if I'm happy with him putting the odd bomb down every now and again, and I like bombs on masters because they've got more AP and they're usually tougher, so they don't give them up to the opponent. And then you can find someone else to have a bomb, whether it be a Dawn Serpent, whether it be a Shadow Emissary, or but someone else who's Dawn Serpent's gonna get a bomb. Actually, there's no one else that's gonna get it. It's the Dawn Serpent. So yeah, plant explosives, because you can really. With the fast crew at the beginning, your Hucksters can get a bomb down. You can get their bombs down turn 1, and you've got 2 bombs down. Your Dawn Serpent's ready to put one down turn 2. McCabe's probably not putting his bomb down turn 1 and probably firing his net gun or doing some other things, but he can always put his bomb down because he'll just ride with me out of combat, put it down somewhere sneaky in my opponent's deployment zone, and then come back into the action. The other thing to mention about McCabe in plant explosives is how you counter it really, really well. So your bomb markers are they're 30 mil, so they're slightly over an inch. And most people's melee ranges are an inch or in this game. So McCabe can just push to the other side of a bomb marker from where someone put it down, pick it up, and then he can just bugger off somewhere else, and you can just pick up their bomb that they put down in your half and then just ride away and put it down in their half, all in one activation. So I love him in plant explosives. Really, he's brilliant. You put all your bombs down and then you start hoovering up theirs or disrupting their ability to pick up yours. So yeah, that's corner deployment. Plant explosives is my ideal.
The only thing I would add to that is that Desper is another excellent target for those explosives markers, because you can put 2 on her or on him, and he's just going to go wherever you need him to go.
Yeah, you probably actually, revisiting my statement, you probably put 1 on each of them. I haven't used Desper too much. It took me a while to make my own proxy, so it hasn't had as much table time as I think the rest of the crew has. And with me using McCabe as a second master, I'm more focused on him. But yeah, you're right. There's enough in the crew that can put the bombs down scheme and disrupt your opponent.
Yeah, normally when I think about who gets the bombs, I think who's fast and who's resilient, and I need both. But what's interesting about those Hucksters is that they're like Seamus. That teleport means they don't have to be that resilient because they can be over there fast and they can just drop the bomb, and then if you kill them, you kill them. But because they've done their job, it's one of those rare times where just fast is good enough.
And one thing about those Hucksters too is that the secret passage, just like Seamus, they can do that even if they're engaged. They can't do false claim, but they can definitely do secret passage.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. How about, is there a strategy or a deployment, Robert, that you love that's outside of the corner plan explosives, or you're pretty aligned with Alyx?
I definitely am aligned with Alyx on plan explosives. Corner definitely helps a lot, especially for getting that artifact engine for everybody fast on turn one. I do like flank turf war as well with McCabe, mainly just because it allows, number one, with flank, it's very easy to score that first, get that first turf marker. But flank also gives you a lot more terrain options in your deployment zone for setting up Hucksters and setting up Desper to then go where you want them to go during the turn. So you're more likely to have more blocking terrain options and thus more of a array of the field for secret passageway for those Hucksters. And then you have more different types of terrain for Desper to ignore or hide behind before he goes wherever you need him to go. Yeah.
So I was going to say that's a really good point, Robert. And probably I'm probably skipping ahead a section about countering him, but putting McCabe in a deployment zone where there's no blocking terrain makes him really sad.
Yes.
Well, and it's something to think about when you're flipping up against him and deciding attacker defender, huh?
Yeah,
it definitely is. I mean, fact of the matter is you're always going to have blocking terrain out there. One thing that did strike me as very interesting is that somebody like Rasputina at first you would think is a very good counter for McCabe until you realize that the Hucksters totally love seeing those ice pillar markers pop up on the board.
Now, Robert, thinking about schemes, can you give me maybe 2 or 3 schemes that you just find a McCabe crew really good at?
Yeah, so one we've already talked quite a bit about, so I won't dive too much into it, but Detonate Charges is one that I think, because of the Hucksters, and honestly because of things like Katashiro being summoned in by Minako Ray, and the agility, the agile ability on Dawn Serpent and Shadow Emissary is very, 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 there's so many varied ways to score Detonate Charges. So that is one where if I see it in the pool, I'm definitely going to consider it for my McCabe crews. I really like Search the Ruins in McCabe crew as well, because there are so many models who can score it. And so it's very forgiving, again, because of Desper, Hucksters, and the 2 dragons. Same thing if you're bringing Minako instead and the Katashiro. The other schemes that I really like with him are Breakthrough. I like Harness the Ley Line. We've mentioned some of the reasons for that as well. Breakthrough is the same reason that I like Search the Ruins. It's not a huge feat for one, if not more, of your models to get into the enemy deployment zone and start dropping scheme markers there. But that being said, I think that he does just as well with some of the killing schemes, especially things like Vendetta and Assassinate. There are definitely ways, especially if you're going up against a master who cannot contend with the amount of duels that you're forcing upon them between McCabe's attack actions and being backed up by some min-3 damage beaters. You can really get those assassination points very quickly, especially if you're putting on that hand pressure. So those are schemes that I really like for him. The aforementioned, I guess, top 4 instead of 3 are those more mobile ones, but he really is capable, and his crew is so forgiving that he can really accomplish most of them.
I think another point to add is that because he can accomplish a lot of those things, you're only ever picking 2 schemes, aren't you? So you probably want some schemes in that pool that he's good at denying as well, denying your opponent. Yep. And there's an interesting point with Dig Their Graves, isn't it? You can be denying the second point by eating the scrap markers that people are putting their schemes next to try and deny the second point for Dig Their Graves. And or you can try and do it yourself if you're not too keen on digging up relics. You can always have Luna sort of digging up markers and then you can put schemes next to them. Not Luna herself; she's insignificant. But so Dig Their Graves is an interesting one. It's not usually one that I definitely prioritize, but he can do it or slightly counter it. And then Assassinate as well. As we've talked about, McCabe's got. Unfortunately, when he dies, it's when he's killed. Actually, instead he's replaced. So he's quite hard to assassinate to some extent, with some healing in the crew and with some stones. But if he gets in danger, he can always just evacuate the area where things are dangerous and where the heat is, and he can relocate to a different part of the table where things are, a little bit less dangerous for him to be.
Well, and you've got kind of a weird, how do I put it, a weird warning system built into McCabe when it comes to Assassinate, because you get him to half points and they have to declare that, right? And so you are then they have Assassinate, and you still have 6 more wounds, and then the hard to woundish replace to get him the hell out of dodge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's got once you've got him to half, he's got another 11 wounds plus that hard to kill-ish in the middle, and he's movement 7 unimpeded, etc. And he can just leave if he needs to. If he's been beaten up in one particular place of the table, he can just run away and deny that last point and just be shooting with his net gun from a distance.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a lot on the show, but I think it's worth calling out again because both you, Robert, and you, Alyx, hinted at it, and it's a level of play that I'm nowhere near yet, but it's something that I'd like the listeners to think about a little bit more. Is the first thing you think about when you look at a pool is what keyword am I going to bring into this pool that's going to help me score? So what keyword screams this list, because I think I can get 6 to 8 points out of it. But you guys both hinted at it. I think that second level analysis, and I need to work on this, is to also look and say, is there a keyword that's going to shut these schemes down and this strat down? And it sounds like McCabe has got some of that ability to shut some things down.
And because the crew's so fast, he can shut down outflank. You can just send a few of your beaters, McCabe, to one side, kill everything your opponent has got on that side, and then if you can't get anything over there, you've shut down outflank. So that's another scheme that you can deny because of his speed, because of his ability to see your opponent going down one flank and then pounce on whatever they're sending there. So you can deny a few schemes. I think probably the schemes that he's not keen on. Oh, did you want to add something, Robert? Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think that without something like outflank is also, it's important to know that strategy-wise, really there's 3, going back to the strategy aspect, there's 3 strategies that he really looks at and says, okay, I can do any one of these. And that is Cursed Idols, Plant Explosives, Turf War, because he has just the mobility to get to wherever he needs to in that crew. I've played several games with Cursed Idols where, again, a lot of the time you end up seeing outflank in the pool with Cursed Idols, and that is a boon to a McCabe crew because he can just send the Dawn Serpent over, and then he can go on one side as well, or concentrate the dragons, and you still have all these mobile models who are going to be camping or be able to get somewhere very quickly, and again, fool your opponent, make them think you're doing other schemes, but really you're the one doing outflank, and you're the one trying to get there for those idols as well. So I think that idols is one that we should mention a little bit as well, because there is a lot. That is one of those where with McCabe where you're going to see a lot of denial and a lot of chicanery and a lot of kind of tricksy play with the McCabe crew.
All right, good. So, guys, I want to take another quick break. And when we get back from this break, I want to talk about how do we counter this powerhouse of a master and keyword before we even know who half his models are. I still can't get over that. The fact that I think it's going to get worse.
It's going to be
but
brilliant.
I also want to talk about, you two are very excited. I don't know if I am. And I also want to talk about kind of that second level play. So we'll be right back. Okay, so now that we kind of get an idea of where McCabe might be the answer to the question posed by the pool or the opponent, I want to talk about something that I find very interesting, and I'm seeing it over and over again in Malifaux 3rd Edition. Is you look at a keyword, you look at a master, and you read it, and you kind of take in what are the main mechanics? Well, where might this be good, and where might that be good, and you get a couple games in with it, and then by your I don't know, I'll say 8-10 games in, I am finding that we're all discovering this kind of hidden secret inside this keyword, something that wasn't obvious when we started playing the keyword, wasn't obvious when we first read the cards, but now that we've gotten a lot of games under our belt, we're starting to see something that's not as obvious. So, Robert, has that happened to you with McCabe?
Yes, with two things. One is Desper. Just Desper alone is really realizing that he's already very good as is, but realizing that once you get an upgrade on him or two throughout the game, you're getting essentially 4 actions out of one model because of the leap. And the knowing how to use Desper and the right time and the right place to get him where you need to score. I find myself every single game, and I've probably got about 30 games in with McCabe at this point. I learned something new about what I can do with Desper. The other thing is actually something that we honestly started the show with, which was Alyx and I both talking about McCabe's attacks and what I like to call the ping pong or the pinball with McCabe of getting all this ping damage from all the extra movement moving over you, and then the trigger from his bullwhip, and then the make way ability. Knowing when to use that and finding new ways to use it is something that I think really takes McCabe to the next level of you can sort of alpha strike kamikaze him into a situation knowing that with Ride With Me you can take him out of it anytime you want, but also knowing the right place to just send him, and the fact that with you essentially can get more about close to 25 inches, 26 inches of movement out of him in a turn, really makes your options so limitless. And so what I say is to take the game to the next level as you play McCabe is really just, once you get into more and more games, really start experimenting, because that's kind of what I've done. Probably the last 10, 15 games or so is I'll take a new model and try it out. I've tried Samurai and Sadir recently, and done some really neat, interesting things that are outside my normal play style, but seeing some of those interactions and really just experimenting, and know that you may not necessarily win some of those games, but the more you learn, the more you play, and the more you experiment, the better you're going to get with actions that you already know.
That sounds excellent. I was just listening. I've probably got two things. My 2 main points. One of them is pretty much in line with Robert's, which is about McCabe's positioning and the duels he causes. It can take a little bit of time to a bit of practice to really get the most out of that with his 2-inch push that's built into his tack, clipping a base, making sure your positioning is correct, and who's going to be involved in those pulses and who's going to be covered, and making it really clear with your opponent, like pathing it out with widgets or with a proxy 50mm base before you do stuff, so that they're really clear on what's happening. That's really important. And it comes with the flexibility of McCabe, that because he can be anywhere on the board, that amount of options can be a little bit paralyzing sometimes, because he can do anything you want him to do, really. There's more scope for making a mistake, if that makes sense. If you're trying to find the best action for McCabe, the best thing for McCabe to do, and you've got loads of options, you're more likely to make the wrong one. So making sure that and this is probably similar for the entire crew, is that not being afraid to change pace, to go from attacker defender, from being aggressive to reactive, to go from killing to scheming, to go from disruption to supporting, and not being afraid of when the activation passes back to you to go, actually, I need to do something completely different from what I planned. And we were saying that when we were talking about the engine for drawing cards and for relics, but it's really, really important for the crew for you to recognize when you need to change pace, and that'll win you games. When you change pace, or when you do something different from what you were doing, and that's what was needed. That's what will win you the games.
Yeah, and one to just jump off of what Alyx is saying here is McCabe, his crew is, I think, one of the easiest crews to switch gears with. And so make sure, I just want to make sure that all of the listeners are knowing that it's totally, totally okay to switch those gears and change what you're doing, mid-game, mid-turn, mid-activation even, if something doesn't go as planned, because his crew recovers so well that it really throws the opponent off, just seeing how much even having just a bad hand or some bad flips can actually still not completely destroy your plans, and that you can change those plans very quickly. And that, to me, that is what is the true advantage of his crew, is that he's so good at recovery and so good at switching those gears, that utilize that. Make sure that you are keeping that open mind and always knowing in the back of your mind, okay, is this going to disrupt my opponent, or is this going to score me points? And if it's not, I need to switch to whatever is going to do one of those two things. The one other thing that I want to add on is that if you are, especially in your setup, right? If you don't have, you think the cards to be able to push off as many artifacts as you want, or you're really concerned about being able to push through some of those duels for McCabe to be able to do the ping pong damage and all of that. Focus, I think, is something that also really can distinguish for that next level play, is knowing when and how to utilize focus and the concentrate action, or ways to get focus out into your crew in creative ways. So one of the other models I always love to take is the Tanuki, because he is able to get so much focus out onto the crew on turn one that I can then utilize in either a defensive or offensive situation. And there have been a lot of games where I've come in, gone into turn two where McCabe has 3 focus stacked on him. I know. Tanuki are ridiculous, and the focus and everything, but the point is that that focus can really, really make or break you, and especially if you don't have a great hand, especially if you really want to make sure that you're getting good damage through, or if you've got on your Hucksters, even some of the focus. If I don't have the cards in hand to guarantee that I'm going to be able to do the secret passage that I need to do, I'll do a focus first. So that if somebody is, or I'll do a focus just because on that turn, I'm going to focus so that they're still near some of that blocking terrain. And even though I can't use that focus for the unopposed duel, I at least have that focus there for if somebody tries to capitalize on my failed secret passage.
Mm-hmm. That Huckster ends up being in a place where you didn't want him to be, and now he's got a little bit of defensive tech through the focus.
Exactly.
And on Desper, it's interesting as well. We're talking about changing gears, and it's really disruptive for your opponent when that happens. They're expecting Desper to be jumping around, putting bombs, doing schemes. And he's got two focus on him, and he's fast. And then last activation of the turn, he charges a henchman, and he uses his focus on his expert thief, and he steals 3 soul stones off your opponent.
Yeah,
it's really disruptive for the opponent when you change gears confidently and they did not expect it. McCabe goes into a group of enemies and he starts pulsing out those jewels and taking damage, and then they send somewhat like a beater in to counter him, and then he runs off and does something different the next turn, and then they've just wasted AP sending someone in.
Well, you've put the opponent out of position. A key model of the opponent's out of position. That's a big deal. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the kind of that scenario there, Alyx. I mean, we keep talking about ways that McCabe can save his rear end and get out of there. I'm not getting a sense that he's afraid of anything. So what is McCabe afraid of?
His crew, McCabe himself, he's quite afraid of stunned, actually. The more I'm playing this game, the more I realise that condition is really, really powerful. I think at first when you're reading it, you're like, no quick actions, no triggers, but actually stunned is brutal for some masters, and it's quite damaging for McCabe. It takes away the rear up pulse on his attack, and it takes away ride with me. So he's still got the net gun. He can still like charge over models to cause some jewels, but he's not doing the ping ponging around. He's not rearing up and causing those massive jewels. So stunned is. It can be quite difficult for him, but then again, I suppose if he's got a mask and a 7 of rams, he can use the quick action on the mask to remove the condition. But stunned is he can do the quick action as a 1 AP. But stunned is quite nasty for McCabe, and people that can maybe match his speed and hunt down the Hucksters. We talked for a long time about how good Hucksters were, and if your opponent kills them, you do lose a big part of your plan. Really, we've talked about the crew being very, very flexible, and the dragons being flexible, and McCabe himself being flexible. Loads of flexibility in the crew, but the Hucksters, they're scheming, they're scoring you points, and if your opponent kills them very quickly, then that's usually a game that's going to be a bit more difficult, I think, for the McCabe player. So stunning McCabe, killing the Hucksters. Those are probably making him set up in a terrible deployment where there's no blocking terrain. Those are probably the things I'd advise your opponent to do.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. So I've played, like I said, a lot of games with McCabe in closed beta and a little bit since release and open beta. And the only losses for a McCabe-led crew that I've seen, it's only happened twice, and both times have been against Lady J. One was me playing against Lady Justice in a tournament, and she was able to she just went straight into both my Hucksters. She went into one on turn 1 and got to it. And it was a situation, again, where I just had an abysmal hand, could not get the secret passage off to save my life. And so he was kind of just stuck in there. And she made short work of it. And that crew also had a Perdita in it, and she just shot the other one off the table despite him being behind some cover and concealment, right? Because that's just what Perdita does. And then the other time was I was using Lady Justice against Robin when he was playing McCabe. And again, even just things that if you can actually just knock him down from the horse as well. So anything that can do that quickly, even if it's not going to score you the points, you're going to make it very, very difficult on the McCabe player to do a lot of the things that he wanted to do when you have a McCabe on foot.
Yeah. Well, that's
and in that game,
go on, Robert.
So it's those killy masters that can also close the distance and really focus on those things.
Well, once McCabe gets on foot, he's very hard to kill once he's on foot. Surprisingly with those 5 wounds, but once he's on foot, he loses a lot of what makes him really good. He loses a lot of that speed, maneuverability, and flexibility. So take him off his horse. The horse is the real master.
Well, it sounds like the more turns he spends on foot or off the table, the better off you are. And if he's still on his horse, getting those second points for your 2 schemes, he threatens that. And same with the Hucksters. So I think those are both good advice. I've got a fully painted Rollins Nightmare box of McCabe, and I got him and painted him up for Guild back when he was in Guild and 2, and I've also got a Cornelius Bass box. So I think I have no choice but becoming an explorer when it happens.
You've already signed up.
I know.
I'm a big Bass fan. I played him a lot in the closed beta, and just the thought of McCabe taking Bass also as a second master and being able to use Ride With Me with Bass to get Bass who can fire a shotgun 8 inches away or 2 inches away. He doesn't really care, or 1 inch away. I mean, from gunfighter. So there's just a lot that I think, even with the creation of the dust markers and manipulating other models, with the terrain, that I think a future Explorer Society episode will definitely be warranted for Mr. McCabe.
I think so too. I think we're going to definitely have to reconvene. And I'll tell you something that I literally just thought about. But a turn 1 ride with me is typically going to be the bonus first as you bring something out of your deployment zone, or maybe it's action to walk and then pick them up and then push. But with Bass, he could be potentially deployed so far out of the deployment zone that you have McCabe, only picking up the ride with me on the second or third action that he does. And, suddenly Cornelius Bass is, on the other side of the table.
Yeah, maybe McCabe is like the extraction mechanism for the Bass crew. He's taking people out of danger. He's pulling them away. Maybe.
No, it's very exciting. And
there's a lot of potential there, even just with the one model.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So seeing where this goes with a whole bevy of new Wastrel keyword McCabe models is very, very, makes me very curious to see what's next.
Yeah, I'm excited, and I kind of like you hinted at the prediction of maybe next year, and maybe that's going to be our treat for Gen Con next year. So we'll start to see some more Explorer Society. It's definitely exciting. That's for sure. Well, gentlemen, wow, that was a lot of information, and I think it was really good information. And I hope everybody out there understands. He's really good. The whole keyword is really good. B, it's
except ruffians.
We barely mentioned them. They're scheme droppers. It sounds like. But it also sounds like. You guys, it takes a little while to get the most out of him. His flexibility creates more choices, which means that you need to see him in a lot of situations to really know which of those choices is the smart one. Robert, did you have any plugs or anything you wanted to mention out that you wanted the audience to be aware of?
Yeah, I do. So we here in Indianapolis are going to actually be hosting our first non-Gen Con gaming convention focused around minis and card games, and that is called Indie Storm. And you can find information, including the event registration that just went up at www.indiestorm.net. And Indie is spelled INDY. So that's going to be next year, January 31st to February 2nd, 2020. Fun thing about that weekend is that there are just a ton of different games and sponsors for it. So, I mean, there's going to be your typical, we are having a Malifaux event, which will interest our listeners. So Friday is going to be an Enforcer Brawl, Saturday, hopefully, if we get the document by then, a Gaining Grounds tournament, 50 stones, and probably I think it's going to be about 3 rounds, and then on the Sunday, Henchman Hardcore. But there's a lot of other games going on there, so if you're interested in games outside of Malifaux, there's probably one there for you as well. But check it out.
Yeah, and I'll have a link to that in the show notes. How about you, Alyx?
Probably just a generic shout out to everyone that's running events, all the British henchmen and everyone that's running events here. They're doing such a good job of continuing this excitement with M3, really getting some good tournaments and really getting some good events going on. And the whole meta itself, the British meta is wonderful. If you guys ever come over and meet with us, or we ever come over with you, it'd be excellent. We're a good good bunch of guys and girls.
Now, before the show, Alyx and I were talking, and that's one of the things I told him is I've got to figure out a way for me to get over there and spend some time with you guys, get my ass handed to me on a Malifaux table, and then go out drinking afterwards. And I don't know, Alyx, I definitely am getting the vibe from you there, and Robert, I'm getting the vibe here, despite some of the challenges in the launch. And, I think that everybody has been taken a little back, taking a little bit of surprise at how much interest there is in this game after a rough year.
Oh, it's
just growing.
It's big. Our community is bigger than it's ever been before, and more than half of our players weren't able to get product just because of the distributor issue, and so. But we still have people coming every week, and it's really blown my mind. And I'm getting messages every week of new people just wanting demos, and they did something right, I think, with this beta and all the buzz kind of growing around it. So I'm really excited to see where it goes.
I think it was really telling that we had a tournament that was still in the open beta, and we had I think 20 people, and then the game wasn't even released yet, and that was, potentially at one of the quietest moments in the game when people were sort of maybe slightly exasperated by all the, it's hard work playtesting. So at sort of its quietest moment, we were still getting, just having tournaments with people. So I think that was really telling.
Yeah, what's exciting is they're coming to a game for the first time or coming back to a game that I think is in the best shape it's ever been in. So I feel very comfortable telling people, hey, if you haven't checked it out, you need to check it out because it's pretty good. I just expect things to get bigger. Crossing my fingers that this distribution stuff gets figured out, not only for the cards and stuff, but we've got some key models that are out of print that I hope come back into print soon, because I think that's been one of the big challenges. And it's been that challenge. We've had that challenge for a little while. And it'd be nice here early on in 3 to see having too much to buy, as opposed to struggling to buy some things. So, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough. You guys were very, very generous, and Alyx and Robert, we're definitely going to have you back when we see that Explorer Society and we see what other filth that this keyword is going to get its hands on. So thanks to everybody who's listening, and make sure you check out the show notes for all the links that we talked about. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to rate and write a review on this podcast so we can find more people almost as cool as you are. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube by searching for Third Floor Wars. That's THIRD. We'll catch you next time on the Third Floor.